Aslem Ahoyti, marhaba bikum lil Daily Mlawi. I'm Brady, and this is the next 5 common misconceptions my Tunisian friends have about Christianity. If you haven't seen the video that we did last time, check it out. It's important because they kind of all build together. It's in the link in the description below. So the first one that we're going to cover today, the first misconception, is how Judaism transitioned to Christianity. Now, I don't know what the actual historical beliefs are within Islam about how this progression took place, but I do often hear things like, Judaism kind of got corrupt or something changed, and then God moved on to Christianity. He brought something new and kind of changed, right? But this is not at all what we believe as Christians. In fact, we still use the Jewish scriptures. And so what is Judaism to Christianity? Well, Judaism holds all the promises of the Messiah. And so when Jesus came, he fulfilled everything that the Messiah was going to do. And because of what Jesus did, the structure of our relationship with God changed. So now we can be in a relationship with God as a father, whereas before we could not have that. That's why Judaism did exist. And so Christianity is not the Judaism 2.0 or a new try, but it is the culmination of what Judaism prophesied would happen. Even Jesus said, I did not come to abolish the law, but I came to fulfill it. So point number 2 is this concept that Christians can kind of just do whatever they want. Now, I understand where this is coming from, especially if you understand the basics of God being loving and forgiving and gracious. It's easy to draw the conclusion that you can kind of just do whatever and God will forgive you. However, this is missing the relational aspect of who God is and how he wants to be in relationship with us. Jesus even says, if you love me, you will obey my commands. So we love God by doing what he's called us to do. We show him that we want to do what's right and live like him by following what he's asked us to do. It's kind of like marriage, for example. I don't do good things to my wife and treat her good instead of poorly because I'm afraid that she's going to leave me or she's going to punish me. I treat her well and I try to do nice things for her because I love her. I want to develop that relationship and us to be closer. And this is kind of the same with God. We don't avoid bad things out of fear of punishment, but actually out of our love for God. So kind of a sub point to this, I also often hear, well, Christians can kind of just pray a prayer and everything's good. Like praying a prayer cleanses you from everything and you can go back to doing whatever you want. This is also a big misconception. The Bible is actually completely against this. Being a Christian is not just praying a prayer. It is complete submission to God. It's submitting your life to the character of God and living by his characteristics, his code of conduct. Now, often Christians even will mess up, will sin. But what happens if somebody really has put their faith, they believe that Jesus died for their sins, the Spirit of God lives in them, they will want to course correct and change from what they're doing to go back to the way that God has called them to live. This is called repentance. It's not just saying sorry, it is literally completely doing a 180, readjusting your life and coming back into what God has called us to live like. Now, the other thing too that I'll say here is that Jesus says that you can know a tree by its fruit. A good tree can't bear bad fruit and a bad tree can't bear good fruit. And he's talking here about people who are actually filled with faith. They are actually Christians. Their life will show it. Their actions will show it. Their actions don't make them a Christian, but the actions are the byproduct of them living according to God's word, according to how God has called them to live. The next point that we're going to talk about is, are all of the Bible stories in the Quran? I'll often hear something like, well, we believe all the prophets, or we have all the stories that the Bible has. But if you've ever read the Bible, you know that's not true. The Bible is 6 times bigger than the Quran. And it's not just fluff, it's not just extra detail that's unnecessary. It is some significant stuff. Things about God interacting with people and foreshadowing the kind of death and salvation that Jesus would bring, prophecies of this Messiah that would come, and him actually being God. I mean, there is tons and tons of full stories that give the whole story of the Bible much better understanding and meaning and value. And the other thing too that I found that's different is the structure. So in the Bible, there is an overarching story. It's written over thousands of years by different authors, but it has one overarching grand story with no contradictions. It's all making sense of God coming and redeeming people, bringing them out of the slavery and the sin that we all fell into, and fixing what was broken and lost in the garden. And so, although there's one big story, the Bible is composed of lots of other little stories. And it's like Russian nesting dolls. All of these stories have deep significance in understanding more about God's character, who He is, and what He desires of us. And so the more you understand those stories, the better you understand the full story. There's a lot of really cool interaction between the Old Testament and the New Testament. When I read the Quran, I felt kind of confused. There's one story in all of the Quran that has a beginning, middle, and end, and that's the story of Joseph. The rest might have a beginning and a middle, and then it will just drop out, or it might just jump into the middle and not really have an ending. And so when I completed the Quran, I understood why a lot of Muslims feel the need to go to tafsir or to a teacher or somebody who knows Islam well to understand what's actually going on in those verses, because it feels kind of incomplete. It feels mysterious. Whereas the Bible, it felt like the story was complete and it made sense of everything because you had all the parts of what God was trying to communicate. The other thing too that I think is significant, kind of tied to this structural piece, is that there's a lot of stories in the Quran that are just mentioned, and you don't really actually hear the depth and the beauty of how God intervened or interacted in those stories. There are significant parts that are missing from the Quran, and I would go as far as to say the key elements, the structural elements of how we know who God is in Christianity, the characteristics that we have that separate the God of Christianity and the God of Islam, are the fundamental things that are missing in the Quran. Our fourth point is the term Son of God. What do we mean by Son of God? I think that's a good place to start, because I think most people, just by the implication, think that it means God had a son. Jesus began to exist at some point. However, this is not at all what Christians believe, nor has it ever been. Now, there's a lot more we're going to go into on the deeper dive video. This is a really important topic, and we're going to look at the original meaning of the Greek words that Jesus used, that his disciples used. And you'll actually find that the meaning itself is very different than what you understand as son. But just for a general reference, Christians have never believed that Jesus just began to exist. He did come into earth. He was entered into time, was born by the Virgin Mary, but he pre-existed his coming to earth. In fact, the Bible talks about this extensively. He was there with God at the beginning, and it talks about him being God. In fact, in John, it talks about him being the one who created all things. Nothing would be that is without Jesus. So, Jesus has always existed. This Son of God term is kind of more of a term that Christians use. But what did Jesus call himself? This is another very significant point. Jesus called himself Yahweh. Now, if you watched our videos before, which hopefully you have, this is the most holy name of God. The Jews would not just say this name flippantly. In fact, if they were going to write it, they had to go through this entire ceremonial cleansing just to be able to write the word. And so claiming to be Yahweh is what was called blasphemy. And this is why often Jesus would say, I am, and he would say Yahweh. He would say, I am the good shepherd, which is a term for God, or I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. These are all claims to deity, both in the title, but then in the name as well. And the Jews understood this. They picked up rocks to stone him on multiple occasions because what he was saying, what he was claiming, was blasphemy. It was punishable by death. The other thing he claimed on himself as a name was the Son of Man. Now this is significantly different, because maybe you've known this, David and other people in the Bible called themselves a son of God. But the Son of Man was a very specific title. It was a title about this messianic king, this messianic ruler who would come, who would be God. It had deity in the title. In fact, there's a prophecy in, I believe, the book of Daniel, where he comes on the clouds of heaven with power, right? Only God comes on the clouds of heaven. And so this title, the Son of Man, was a title specifically for the Messianic God King. And Jesus claimed that of himself all the time. The final point that we have to wrap up the summary version of our series is that external sources are as trustworthy as primary sources. Now we're talking about kind of like academics. If you've ever been in college and had to write a research paper, or maybe in postgraduate work, your professor, if they're good, will always tell you to go to the earliest sources possible, and if at all possible, go to primary sources. Now there's a reason. We've done this in academia for years. It's because those resources will probably be the most accurate. Everybody else's thoughts after that can change or have biases, or they can have mistakes even. Technically, our videos even are an external resource. Hopefully we're not making any mistakes, but the Bible will be a better resource for what the Bible has to say about these things than our thoughts or our interpretation. And so we encourage you to go to primary resources. We have some friends who have come across books that Muslims have written about Christianity, and often they are missing 90% of things, or they're purposely leaving things out, or they're accidentally leaving things out because of biases. And I would just encourage you, if you really want to know, what does the Bible say about this? What does the Bible say about that? You can Google search it and find the Bible online and read it for yourself and get it from the primary source. So just as I wanted to learn what the Quran actually said, I wanted to learn what Islam actually taught, I read the Quran, I read the Hadith. I didn't read, people's opinions or ideas outside of it. I went to the primary resource, and I encourage you to do the same. If you have questions, you're welcome to engage with Christians and ask them, but ultimately the Bible will be the best, most trustworthy source. Thank you guys for joining us at Daily Mlawi. We hope this video was fun and interesting. Hopefully you learned something new. Stay tuned also for our more deep dive videos on these same topics. We'll put those in the description box below. They'll be linked. And we hope that you join us for our upcoming videos as well. We'll see you later.